Hello and welcome to an episode of I need to clear out the veg drawer. Let's stick it all in the slow cooker. After the slow cooker cacciatore came out so well, I've decided the veg drawer does need clearing out, so let's do another stew. I'm going to use the textured soy protein pieces again. So this time I've gone for the vegan steak and then I'm going to do the pork chops as well. Then I remembered I had these mushrooms in the freezer. I went to the supermarket a couple of months ago and they were on a yellow sticker. So in case it doesn't happen in the States, in the UK, when it's on the last day they can be sold, quite often they'll put a yellow sticker on it and it's remarkably cheaper. I think these were initially £2.50 and I got them for 75p. I just cleaned them off with a paper towel, stuck them in the freezer and kind of forgot about them. So today's the day I'm going to use them. So they are still very frozen, but that's fine. I've got 5 of these banana shallots, but you can use any kind of onion that you want. So I'm going to take off the kind of sprouting end, but leave the root end intact. Might leave it whole and then cut it into rounds. I'm taking off the papery skin if you need to take off the first layer of onion itself, if it's a bit tough. And then I'm going to chop it into pieces about that big, I think. Sort of nice mouth-sized pieces. Last time I sauteed the onion first. This time I'm not going to bother. I just want to see, what the flavour's like. Put all the shallots into the Instant Pot liner. I've got like 7.5 little carrots. Any black spots like that, just cut them away and go kind of quite deep around it, just to, make sure there's no spoilage in there. I'll just give these a scrub, cut the pointy ends off, and then just chop that into sort of bite-sized pieces. I did want some celery in this, but I just didn't have the energy this morning to go to the supermarket. But I am going to pop in some celeriac. So that's what a celeriac looks like. This is kind of the ball that celery, the stalks then grow out of. It's got sort of a mildly celery flavour, but it's quite creamy, a little bit sweet, very tasty. And because it's a solid root vegetable, it keeps in the fridge for ages. I quite enjoy prepping celeriac as well because you have a bit of fun with the speed peeler. So you just put it on and shave it. So I'm going to do this in slabs. Maybe in half and then into pieces about so big. Here's the mushrooms. Now you'll find when you freeze mushrooms, they'll go very soggy when you defrost them. When you freeze something, the water inside it expands and then that stresses the cell walls. When you then thaw it, all the liquid kind of seeps out, so they go a bit floppy and soggy. So I'll just break them into pieces straight into the Instant Pot. These are baby portobello mushrooms, but you can use any type you like. So again, just into sort of bite-sized chunks. You can cut them as well if you want, that's fine. Now these pieces are obviously massive, and for in a stew I want them slightly smaller. I'm going to try cutting them dry just to see what happens, and then if not, I've got another plan. So I think I want the pieces that kind of size. So let's see. Try it with a serrated blade. Let me try this one, see what happens with this. My initial idea was to wrap them in like a muslin parcel, make like a little bag, and then pull them out at the end and chop them down. Yeah, I think that's going to be fine. So, and just for the sake of saving time at the end, yeah, let's do it this way. I'm just going to give everything a quick mix. It's now time to start putting some flavours and liquids in here. I'm going to make a little bouquet garni like I did for the pot au feu. A bouquet garni is just like a little package of fragrant things. I'm going to do mine a little square of muslin. I've also seen people do it with like the bottom end of a stalk of celery, layer things in there, put another piece of celery on top and then bind it together. And it works in a similar principle to a tea bag. So you can just take it out at the end rather than having all the little bits of herbs. Feel free to use whatever herbs, spices, kind of aromatics that you want to. You can even just use the dry mixed herbs if you want. Got 3 little cloves. Cloves are quite an intense spice, so you don't need much. These 3 little ones at the front, they're juniper berries. That goes into gin, so I thought it'd be interesting to try. And then these 3 are allspice berries. I think it's also known as pimento. Tastes a little bit like mixed spice, but very fragrant. But again, quite a punchy one. So I'm just going to use the 3. I'll do a teaspoon of dried savory. That's the name of the herb. If I can find its botanical name, I'll slide that in for you. A little bit like oregano, thyme, that kind of flavour. Half a teaspoon of lovage. The smell of it reminds me a little bit of carrot skin. Got a couple little sprigs of fresh rosemary and then 2 little sprigs of fresh sage. Got some kitchen string, and I'm going to cut that and use that to tie off the pouch. So I tend to bring the corners in together and then bring the loose sides up as well. So I'm just making sure that everything's enclosed. Wrap the string around it and then just tie that off in a knot. So that's nicely secured. Drop the pouch in, and then once the liquid's in there, I'll kind of bury it a little bit. I'll also add half a teaspoon of dried onion granules, just to boost up the onion flavour a little bit. Half a teaspoon of dried garlic. I'll do a 1/4 teaspoon of celery salt, so it's got that kind of celery aroma to it. Good grind of black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon, something like that. I'll do 2 tablespoons of beef flavour stock, the Massel brand one that I use. For the liquid, I'm going to use a can of beer. Now I thought I had some dark ale, and apparently I don't. So I'm going to use a can of Stella. If you are cooking this for a vegan, do make sure that the beer is vegan. If it doesn't say it on the can, there's a website called barnivore.com, like carnivore but with a B. I'll stick the link in the description for you. You can type in the name of the alcohol and search, and it'll bring up, if people have submitted, it'll bring up whether it's vegan or not. Because I'm using lager, I'm going to have to add other bits and pieces just to intensify the flavour a bit. So if you can find a dark ale, then you won't need to worry about this. I'm going to pop in some 100% cacao. So there's the block. So it looks very chocolatey, but I use it because it gives a really nice deep intensity of flavour. So I'm going to grate some of that in. I won't do much though. To complement the cacao, I'm going to put in like a 1/4 teaspoon of instant coffee. Skip that if you don't want it. But that again just sort of enhances the cacao flavour and deepens the richness. I'm going to use some treacle in this one. I'll do like half a teaspoon, something like that. And I can always add a little bit more in later. I'm going to pop in some of this malt extract. So it tastes a little bit like Ovaltine, that kind of thing. Like Maltesers, if you've ever had those, it's that kind of taste. Some beers use malted barley, and that's what this is made out of. So I thought, oh, I'll put a bit of this in, and then that might mimic that dark beer kind of flavour as well. So I'll do maybe a tablespoon of that. This hasn't got the same level of sweetness that the treacle does. There is some sweetness, but it's not as intense. I'm going to stick in a can of cannellini beans, pour that in, and then it's time for beer. And then the rest I'll top up with water. So you want enough to get everything nice and submerged. Just boil in the kettle for a bit more water, but I'll give this a good stir in the meantime. And I'll get it started in the Instant Pot. So I'm going to bury that little bouquet garni underneath. We're going to go to slow cooker. Yeah, I'm going to do it on 4 hours. I'm going to give the liquid a little try, see if it needs anything else. I'm going to pop in a touch of soy sauce. This is a very dark one and it's very intense. So I'll do maybe half a teaspoon, and then I'm going to leave it, and then I'll try it again towards the end, and then I can start adjusting things a bit more then. I'm also going to pop in about half a teaspoon of MSG. This isn't an Instant Pot lid, but thankfully I've got a pot that it fits. That'll do its thing for 4 hours, and I'll probably come down, you know, maybe once or twice and give it a stir just to check nothing's catching on the bottom. Slow cooker's got about 15 minutes left on it, but that can just, it's not going to burn or anything. I've stirred it a couple of times, and I've tested the veg, so the carrots and the celeriac. They're nice and soft now. I've had to put a jumper on because it's freezing. It's like my hands will feel like ice, and I'm trying not to put the heating on because energy is, well, you know. I'm going to check the flavour at this stage, and then I'm going to thicken it using, I've got some gluten-free gravy granules. The gluten-free part isn't mandatory for you, that's just what I've got in the cupboard. If you're in the States, you're probably going to need to use like cornstarch mixed with a bit of water, make a slurry, because British gravy is very different than American gravy. These have got some flavour to them. They're gravy granules for beef. So a little tip, if you're never sure if something's vegan, if it says for beef, chances are it is going to be kind of meat flavoured, but if it says beef gravy granules, chances are it's going to have beef in it. But just look on the back of the pack. Show you a quick peek in the pot. It's not going to look massively different because the lid's been on, so it's not evaporated tons. But yes, there's going to be lots of liquid there. Maybe a little bit too much liquid. Fished out the bouquet garni, so I'll let that cool down, and then I can wash the muslin. That can be used again. So I've taken out 3 or 4 ladles full. Otherwise, there's just going to be so much liquid in there that, yeah, I'd rather take it out, and then if necessary I can put it back in. Onto the puree. Pomme puree is French for fancy mashed potatoes. So they're silky smooth and really, really rich. So I've cooked my potatoes in the microwave. I just chop them down into roughly equal pieces, skins on, covered them with a lid, and then blasted them for 5 minutes, stirred halfway through, and then another 5 minutes. It's going to depend on the quantity that you're doing, how long it'll take in the microwave. If I do like a kilo, it takes usually 15 minutes, whereas this is half a kilo, 500 grams, which is like 1.1 pounds, and that took 10 minutes. So I'm going to rice the potatoes into a saucepan, and I'm also going to start heating up some coconut cream and milk. So I'm going to do 100 grams of coconut cream and 50 grams of oat milk. If you've seen the gluten-free gnocchi video that I did a little while ago, you'll be familiar with the potato ricer. Same principle as a garlic press. The reason I especially like doing potatoes in the microwave is you're not introducing any more water to it. Once they finish cooking, there'll be a pool of water at the bottom, and that's what's come out of the potatoes. So make sure you drain that off, otherwise it's just going to waterlog it. I just find you get a very fluffy, unadulterated potato-ness, which is always amazing. So I've loaded up the chamber, and then just press it down, and you'll see it all extrudes out of the sides, and then pull it out, and then I'll pull the skins away. So just repeat that until all of the potato is wormified. So that's all of the potato riced. I'm bringing that back up to heat on a very gentle temperature. So it's on 4, mine goes up to 9. So you don't want anything too aggressive underneath that. If you're boiling potatoes on the stove, make sure you heavily salt the water. But because I did mine in the microwave, I'm gonna add in a little pinch of salt into the pan. I'll do like a 1/4 teaspoon, maybe, something like that. The milk and the coconut cream is all melted together and incorporated. I'm going to be a responsible adult just for a minute and advise you that you don't eat this every day because we're about to put this amount of butter into those potatoes. So this is 200 grams. This is vegan spread. I didn't have any vegan butter, frustratingly, but I think it should be fine. So that's 500 grams of potato and 200 grams of butter. And then we've got 100 grams of coconut cream, which is fatty. You can see how thick the potato is because I haven't introduced any more water to it. So it's already quite luxuriant. I'm going to work the butter into the potatoes. I might do like half at a time. That's all the butter worked into it. I'm going to pour in half of the creamy milk, and I'll work that in and put the rest. Maybe. I'm not sure. This feels like a lot because the recipe I've used isn't vegan, so it could be that the ingredients respond differently. I'm in two minds whether to add the rest of the milk. Yeah, I'm going to do it. Might live to regret it, but at least I'll know for next time. There, it's all worked in. If you want it super smooth, feel free to pass it through a sieve. You can see there's like tiny little lumps. I'm not so bothered. It is a little bit loose. Maybe don't even add the milk, just do the coconut cream, because I think dairy cream, I guess it thickens differently, but that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to leave it on the heat onto thickening the stew. I'm going to sprinkle in a big spoonful. It's maybe, I don't know, 1.5 tablespoons, something like that. Give that a good stir. This doesn't look like it's thickening at all. And in the packet says 1 to 2 teaspoons. And I've definitely put at least 1 to 2 teaspoons. So I'm not 100% sure. I guess I'll just leave it for a minute. I'm going to chuck in another big spoonful. In the meantime, I'll check the flavour, what it's doing at the moment. I'm going to chuck in another tablespoon of stock. The flavour's almost there, but it just needs a little bit more intensity. But yeah, I think 1 more tablespoon and that should do it. I'm debating whether to just do a cornstarch slurry because this is just getting silly. That's had a massive amount of granules in it. This issue could be because they're gluten-free gravy granules. Maybe that's why it's doing it. And potato starch isn't the most powerful thickener that I've struggled in the past to thicken it properly. If you're using regular non-gluten-free granules, just do 1 bit at a time, or put like 2 big spoonfuls in a cup and then enough water just to get it into one, you know, like a thick paste so there's no lumps in it. Then mix that into the main body, and that should help. You're almost forming a slurry, or like a roux, I suppose. I've mixed up roughly a teaspoon of cornstarch with like a tablespoon of water. So I'll pour that in, and hopefully that's going to do the job. Yeah, I don't think that's going to be enough cornstarch because there is a massive volume of liquid there. Grab some more cornstarch, so I'll just keep thickening this up and see you for the eating. Time to slurp on some stew. I'm very excited. Whoa, the smell's coming out of this bowl. My goodness. In the end, I probably did, I don't know, maybe 2.5 tablespoons of water, and maybe 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. You just need enough liquid to cornstarch ratio that it's a fluid rather than a paste. I'll take it to the pot so you can kind of see where it's at. I could have probably gotten it a bit thicker, but I'm just getting a bit frustrated with it. So, you know, just keep adding stuff in until it's the way you want it. And that will probably thicken a bit overnight. So there's all sorts of lovely colours there. I mean, it's hard to pretty up a bowl of stew, but maybe you don't have to sometimes. So the pom puree, it's going to mix with the, it'll mix with the stew liquid, and it'll just become even lovelier and more rich. Oh wow, that's divine. Yeah, I'm kind of had the words knocked out. Ooh, As a group of flavours, everything's working together really, really nicely. The beer is there, but I only know it's beer because I put it in there. Otherwise, you might not necessarily identify it as beer. Pom puree is just, oh, it's heavenly. It's super rich and very indulgent, very sumptuous. It's not something, please don't eat it every day. If you do, don't blame me for the consequences, because your doctor will put you over his knee. I am a bit of a hog for mashed potatoes. I normally have a massive pile on my plate, but that just did a small kind of, maybe a ladleful equivalent of that. And because it's so rich, I think that's probably going to be enough. That's what I'm telling myself anyway. You know I'm going to be in that pot with a spoon later. Pulled a piece of each of the meats out. So this one is the pork. That's the steak one. Despite them being made out of the same thing, the texture is very different. It's kind of hard to describe what the difference is, but as I chew on it, I can tell which one, oh yeah, that's the steak, and oh yeah, that's the pork. I highly recommend those ones because they're in the cupboard, so they're not using any energy to store them. And then you just add some water, and then you've got like a really good protein source, and it satisfies that back teeth thing that I miss from meat. When it comes to the veggies, you can pretty much put anything in here. You just want to try and keep to root vegetables. So, I mean, avoid things like lettuce. You could put kale in here. It would tolerate the heat and the amount of stirring that you're gonna have to do. It would handle that quite well. I'd avoid spinach, but you could do parsnip, swede, I want to say rutabaga in the States maybe, turnip, anything hard. Radishes, I think I've done radishes in a stew before. It's a bit weird, but it's quite nice. You can play around with the different beans. You can skip the beans altogether if you want, but you could put chickpeas or kidney beans, anything really. Just, yeah, anything that's going to tolerate, you know, being cooked in heat for such a long time. Or you can just do it on the stove, and that would probably take half an hour, something like that. But I wanted to put it in and walk away and do some editing. You could also change it up by using red wine instead of the beer. That would be good. Or if you want to skip alcohol altogether, just use more stock powder and then water. There are now quite a few alcohol-free wines available. I've had a couple and I was kind of surprised at how good they were. I mean, they're not exactly dead on because I think alcohol has a flavour that's, yeah, it brings something to it. But yeah, you know, just for the flavour sort of side of it, then yeah, get some booze-free alcohol, you know, booze-free red wine or beer, put that in. Hit subscribe and tap the bell icon if you want more meals that are easy to prepare, but absolutely full of flavour. And in the meantime, check out this.